She stared at him across the length of the banquet table, thumbed the safety off her disruptor, and left him to die. He was only a human escort, a mess cook actually, though nobody had bothered reading the paperwork, dropped in the middle of a room with 35 assassins closing in and no weapon but a carving knife. But 6 hours later, when she came back to collect the body, she did not find a grave. She found a mountain of corpses and a human who simply refused to stop moving. 6 hours earlier, the air in the banquet hall of Yathara Station tasted of copper, burnt ozone, and the sweet chemical rot of synthetic roast in warming trays. The ceasefire signatures were unsigned. The 41 species around the table did not yet know they were dead. And the man at the far end of the room was still cutting his food slow, chewing like a man deciding whether the weather outside was worth walking through. Yathara Station spun in the black above a lifeless gas giant 3rd sector deep, a diplomatic ring nobody had wanted to build, and everybody now needed to defend. Its corridors smelled of coolant and cheap incense. Its floors were polished until they threw back the delegates' silhouettes like ghosts. And in its central banquet hall, 3,000 light-years from anything green, the Vrethkai Ascendancy had agreed to sit at the same table as the Seth Confederacy, the Miran Starweavers, and 18 other signatories, because the alternative was a war none of them could pay for. Sovereign Matriarch Serat Vel of the Vrethkai Ascendancy stood at the head of that table. Her true name was a chain of subsonic clicks, low as a mine collapse, and the conclave translator had ground it down to 3 syllables and called that acceptable. Her scales were dry copper, her 4 eyes tracked in pairs. She had been alive when the outer arms of the galaxy were still counted as legends, and she had signed peace treaties older than most of the delegates in this room. She had also in her youth killed 6 of her own siblings with a ceremonial glass blade in a corridor no wider than a man's shoulders. She knew what a killer looked like. She was, in her own estimation, quite good at spotting them. She did not spot Owen Blake. Nobody did. The manifest for the human delegation had listed one Colonel Rachel Doran, a senior military escort, decorated, cleared for close-quarter action within conclave neutral zones. It had also listed one Owen Blake, cultural catering liaison, 2nd grade. What the manifest did not say, because nobody had updated it, was that Colonel Doran was 3 days dead. She had eaten shellfish at a routine layover on Kepler Junction, actual shellfish, imported at appalling expense as a diplomatic favor, and her throat had closed inside 20 minutes while the ship's medic ran through every antitoxin in the locker in the wrong order. The conclave, presented with the loss of the human military escort on the eve of the most sensitive negotiations in a decade, had done what large bureaucracies always did. It had filed the paperwork forward without reading it. Owen Blake had been the only other human on the transport. He was 34 years old and looked at first glance 40. He was not particularly tall. His hair was the color of wet gravel. His hands were wide and rough at the knuckles from years of gripping bone saws and knife handles that had not been designed for anyone soft. He wore a stained apron over his catering blacks. He walked slow. He looked, more than anything, tired. He had been told by an exhausted conclave adjutant with 2 hours of sleep and 39 other logistical fires burning that he was now the ranking human at the ceasefire summit, that he was to stand at the far wall during the ceremonial meal, that he was to speak to no delegate unless spoken to, and that under no circumstances was he to touch the food he was serving with his bare hands. The adjutant had not asked whether he understood. She had walked away halfway through the last sentence, already dictating to another feed. Owen had understood. He had taken his position at the wall. He had watched the delegates file in. He had watched them settle into the strange, careful ballet of a peace summit, where nobody quite believed peace was possible. Seth Confederacy diplomats, 6-armed and translucent, sat with their spider-thin limbs folded in the specific pattern that meant we are here in good faith. Miran starweavers, tall and shining, whose voices came through the translators like rain on a copper roof. Vrethkai foreign trade officers in deep green robes. A single Koryali envoy at the corner, thick and low and grey, watching everything with two enormous black eyes. Owen had counted them the way a cook counts plates at a wedding, quietly from the wall, so that if anything went wrong later, he would know who had gone missing before the caterers did. Now, with the ceremonial roast carved and the plasma lances of the honor guards catching the amber light of the overheads, he was doing the one thing the adjutant had absolutely, specifically not authorized him to do. He was sitting at the corner of a low table meant for junior staff, and he was eating a slice of the roast off a folded napkin. Slowly. Something was wrong in the room. He had known it for about 20 minutes. At the far end of the hall, near the beverage counter, a Vrethkai honor guard in copper mail was paying for a drink. That, in itself, was not remarkable. The guards were allowed a small ration during ceremonial functions, on the theory that a thirsty guard was a distracted guard. What was remarkable was the credit chit the guard had slid across the counter. The chit was cream-colored. It had a black 7 printed in a small square in the lower left corner. The number was intentionally hard to read. You had to have handled a lot of them to see it fast. Owen had handled a lot of them. He had seen that chit twice before in his life. Once, when he was 22 years old, in a barge processing dock on Kepler extraction colony, in the hand of a man who had walked into the mess and offered every extraction crew 15,000 standard to look the other way during a shift change. Once, when he was 30, in the same dock, in the hand of a woman who had done the same thing with a slightly different accent. Both times, within a week, someone had died. The chit was Keth Syndicate issue, 7th ring distribution. It was the kind of paper you handed to a man you did not know when you needed him to stop being a witness. The Vrethkai honor guard tucked it back into a belt pouch. He nodded at the bartender. He walked back to his post at the northeast wall of the banquet room. He did not look at anyone as he walked. Owen chewed his slice of roast. He did not stop watching the guard. There were 3 Vrethkai honor guards in the room. 2 of them were doing exactly what Vrethkai honor guards did during ceremonial functions, standing very still, sweeping the room in slow arcs, eyes flat and bored. The third, the one at the northeast wall, was doing something almost identical, and yet not quite. His weight was slightly forward on the balls of his feet. His hand, resting on the pommel of the ceremonial plasma lance, was tighter than it needed to be. Every 8 seconds, Owen had timed it. His 4 eyes flicked to the northwest wall, where the second guard was standing. Then his eyes flicked to the doorway at the south end of the hall. Then back to the second guard, every 8 seconds. He was waiting for something. Owen set his slice of roast down on the folded napkin. He picked up a glass of water that was not his and sipped it very slowly, so that the movement of his hand covered the movement of his eyes. He watched the northwest guard for a full minute. That guard was also glancing at the doorway, not every 8 seconds, every 12, but he was glancing. 2 of the 3 Vrethkai honor guards, Owen decided, were expecting something to come through that south door. He looked at the third honor guard. That one was standing at the west wall, hands folded behind his back, 4 eyes half-lidded and pointed downward at the polished floor. Bored the way a guard was supposed to be bored, not glancing at the doorway, not glancing at anything. He was the only Vrethkai honor guard in the room who was clearly not expecting anything to come through that south door. That guard, in Owen's estimation, was about to die. He would have to talk to station security. He would have to talk to them fast, and most importantly, he would have to talk to them without any of the 3 Vrethkai honor guards noticing him talk. He picked up the napkin, the slice of roast, and the glass of water, and he stood up the way tired catering staff stand up when they realize their break is over. Nobody in the room looked at him. He walked, in the slow shuffle of a man carrying a load along the wall furthest from the northeast guard, and he passed through the service door into the kitchen corridor. The corridor was full of steam. He walked 12 paces down it. He set the napkin, the roast, and the glass of water on a warming shelf. He turned to the wall, where a small maintenance panel was mounted at chest height. He pressed the button. The Yathara station security officer who answered was a Miran star weaver, 3 meters tall, translucent, 6-limbed, with a voice that came out of the panel like rain hitting a copper roof. Owen had not been prepared for what a Miran voice would sound like through a translation feed. He blinked. "Report your emergency," the officer said. The translation was flat. Owen said, "There are 3 Vrethkai honor guards in the banquet hall. 2 of them are on syndicate paper. They are expecting an attack through the south door. The 3rd one, the one at the west wall, is the target. He does not know." Silence through the panel. "Please identify your designation," the officer said at length. "Owen Blake, Cultural Catering Liaison, 2nd grade. You are a cook." "Yes." "Please describe the specific tactical training that enables you to make that identification." Owen thought about that. He said, "I have seen the paper before, twice. Both times somebody died within the week. I recognize it." Longer silence. The Miran officer's voice, when it came back, was so precisely polite that Owen understood immediately that he had already lost the conversation. "Cultural Catering Liaison Blake, please return to your assigned post at the wall. Yathara Station Security is aware of all threats within the banquet chamber. Your service is appreciated. Please do not attempt to contact this frequency again during ceremonial hours." The panel clicked off. Owen stood in the steam for a moment. He rubbed his jaw with the flat of his palm. He looked at the warming shelf. The slice of roast was starting to cool. He picked up the napkin, the roast, and the glass of water, and he walked back into the banquet hall. He returned to his corner table. He sat down. He ate his slice of roast slowly, one small bite at a time, and he watched the door at the south end of the hall. He was still eating when the door opened. The room went silent in under 2 seconds. Every conversation stopped mid-word. Every glass paused mid-lift. The plasma lances of the honor guards on the racks along the walls went from a low hum to nothing because the guards holding them stopped breathing. 41 species, 12 pending signatures. Every set of eyes in that chamber turned to the south door. The thing that had come through was a Velkorath. Owen had never seen one in person. Very few humans ever had. The Velkorath were not exactly a species. They were a caste, born and unmade inside the Keth Syndicate for a single purpose. They were tall, closer to 3 meters than 2, and narrow in the shoulders, with plates of a dark, oily material fused directly to their bone. Their heads were long and low, and their mouths did not open sideways the way most predator jaws did. They opened downward, and inside was a second, smaller jaw of teeth arranged in a circle. They did not walk. They glided. They did not speak. They contracted their contract, and then they went where the contract told them to go. The one at the south door tilted its head. Its 4 eyes swept the room. It found Zereth Vel at the head of the table, and its head stopped tilting. Zereth Vel of the Vrethkai Ascendancy, sovereign matriarch of 6 inhabited systems, veteran of 9 wars, and the mother of a lineage that reached back to before her species had discovered fire, did what any rational being would have done in her position. She counted. She counted the delegates in the room, 39. She counted the honor guards, 12, hers and everyone else's. She counted the exits, 2. She counted the weapons that had gone from ceremonial to charged in the last 2 seconds, 11. She counted the weapons that had, for reasons she was going to spend the next 4 minutes trying to understand, not charged. 3 had not charged, her 3. The 2 at the northeast and northwest walls had not moved. Their plasma lances were still hanging at parade rest. They were watching the Velkarat with a stillness that was not fear. It was permission. The third Vrethkai honor guard, the one at the west wall, who had been half-lidded and bored, was the first to understand what was happening. His four eyes went fully open. His hand went for his lance. He was fast. Vrethkai honor guards were selected for that reflex, and he almost made it. The lance was clearing its rack when the Velkarath, without seeming to move, was suddenly standing 4 meters closer than it had been, and something long and dark had passed through the guard's neck plating, and the guard's 4 eyes went out one after the other, and he sat down against the wall like a man who had decided to take a nap. The Velkarath kept gliding. Zerath Vel put her hand on the edge of the ceremonial table. She began to think, very quickly, about the fastest way to get her ceremonial guard around her and out through the northern service passage, and she began to accept, in a small, cold part of her mind, that she probably was not going to make it. Then she looked at the human at the corner table. He had not moved. He was still holding a slice of roast on a folded napkin. He was still chewing. His eyes were on the Velkarath. The Velkarath saw him too. Its head tilted the other way. It measured him for exactly 1 second, the way a predator measures a prey it is not sure is prey, and it dismissed him. He was small. He wore no armor. He carried no weapon. His shoulders were rounded from years of standing over hot surfaces. The Velkarath had a contract with 35 names on it, and 32 of those names were in this room, and this small, tired human was not one of them. The Velkarath resumed its glide toward the head of the table. Zerath Vel, who was one of the 32 names, watched it come. She raised her disruptor, which she was not supposed to have at a ceremonial function and which was standard practice for a sovereign matriarch of the Vrethkai ascendancy to bring to a ceremonial function anyway. She fired. The disruptor bolt struck the Velkarath's shoulder plate at a flat angle and skated off in a shower of blue sparks, and the Velkarath, without breaking stride, adjusted its angle to close the distance 1 meter faster. The disruptor bolt struck the wall behind it. It punched a hole through the wall the size of a plate. It kept going, through a corridor, and it clipped a ration crate 3 rooms down. That was, she would think later, the last effective military move she had made in the entire encounter. She raised the disruptor for a second shot. The Velkarath's arm came up, and she saw, coming out of its wrist, a long, dark rod tipped in something that was not metal. She adjusted her aim. She fired again. The rod hit her hand first. The disruptor tumbled across the polished floor and clattered against the leg of the table. She looked down at the ruin of her hand. She looked up at the Velkarath. She looked up at the ceremonial roast still sitting between her hand and the assassin's face. She looked past the roast at the human. The human had stopped chewing. He was setting the slice of roast down on the folded napkin, carefully. He was standing up. He was picking up the carving knife. The banquet hall of Yathara Station used a set of ceremonial carving knives that were, in the end, ceremonial only in their handle. The handle was polished Vrethkai heart glass, grey and gold. The blade was carbon steel, real carbon steel, the kind that came from a foundry on a heavy world and got shipped out at appalling cost because the Vrethkai preferred the taste of meat cut with a knife that had not been sonically cleaned. The blade was 15 centimeters long, 1.5 millimeters thick at the spine, and honed to a working edge on a whetstone every morning by a rotating assignment among the catering staff. That morning, the assignment had been Owen's. He had honed the knife for 18 minutes. He had tested it, as he had tested a knife every morning for 14 years, by drawing it across a sheet of thin paper and watching the paper part. He had wrapped it in a clean cloth. He had walked it out to the banquet hall. He had set it beside the roast. Now he was picking it up. He came around the corner of the table and he crossed 6 meters of banquet floor in 3 strides. He was not running. He was moving low. His shoulders were forward, his hips were forward, his weight was driving into the floor and off it in the way of a man who had once walked into burning brush with a rake in one hand, and had learned that if you sprinted you fell, and if you stood you burned. You ground, you used the floor. You did not lift your feet more than you had to. The Velkorath heard him coming at about step 2. It turned its head, and its dark rod came around in an arc. The rod caught Owen across the left shoulder. He kept going. He came inside the Velkorath's arm. He put the 15 centimeters of carbon steel into the joint seam at the base of the Velkorath's neck plating. A joint is a joint. 14 years of breaking down whatever the barges shipped had made the angle automatic. There was a place where the plate did not meet the plate. There was a soft, wet space behind it. He knew without thinking that soft, wet space was there. He put the knife into it. The Velkorath went stiff, then it did not go stiff. It reached with one long clawed hand up and back, and it hooked Owen's collar, and it hauled him off the floor and threw him. Owen hit the ceremonial table with the small of his back. He did not stop. He rolled off the far side. He came up on his hands and knees. His left arm was not working right. There was blood on his apron already, black under the amber lights. The Velkorath was pulling the knife out of its neck. It looked at the knife for one long second. It looked at Owen, its head tilted again. This time, when it measured him, it did not dismiss him. Zerath Vel of the Vrethkai Ascendancy, watching from behind an overturned table, made a small sound in her throat that was not part of any language and would not translate. It was a sound she had made once in her youth, in the corridor with the glass blade, when her older brother had turned toward her, holding his own severed arm. It was the sound of understanding that the thing in front of you was not what you had thought it was. The Velkorath tossed the ceremonial carving knife back at Owen's feet. It was a gesture. In the dialects of the outer sectors, where the Keth Syndicate did most of its recruiting, it was a specific gesture. It meant, pick up your weapon. It meant, I want you to have it in your hand when I take it from you. Owen picked up the knife. He wiped the blade against his apron. He put his weight forward on his right leg. His left shoulder was numb. He could feel warmth spreading down his side under his shirt, where the ceremonial pulse had clipped him. He did not look at the wound. He did not look at the delegates diving under tables. He did not look at Zerath Vel of the Vrethkai Ascendancy, watching him with all 4 eyes wide. He looked at the Velkorath. The Velkorath came. It closed the distance the way something that had been bred to close distance closes distance. Its lower jaw dropped, and its second inner ring of teeth extended. Its clawed hand came around in a wide arc, meant to catch him at the neck. Its dark rod, still slick with its own blood, drove up from underneath. Owen was not there. He had moved a quarter step to his left, and he had dropped his weight, and he had gone under the arc of the arm. The rod scraped the side of his ribs. He felt the skin part. He kept going. He came up inside the Velkorath's guard with the carbon steel knife pointed at the underside of the jaw plate. The knife did not go in. The plate under the jaw was thicker than the plate at the neck. The blade skidded off it. The Velkorath's clawed hand caught the back of Owen's neck. It lifted him. It slammed him down. Owen hit the floor with his shoulders. The breath went out of him. He held onto the knife. The Velkorath's inner jaw came down. He rolled. The inner jaw hit the polished floor beside his ear with a wet cracking sound. Pieces of tile flew. He rolled again. He came up under the Velkorath's other arm. He put the knife into the soft place behind the knee joint plating. The Velkorath's leg buckled. It went down on one knee. It caught his ankle as he tried to move past it and threw him. He hit the ceremonial table again, the second time in less than a minute, and this time, when he came up, blood was running freely from his eyebrow into his left eye. He blinked it away. He got his back against the leg of the table. He got the knife up. Behind the Velkorath, at the northeast wall, one of the 2 honor guards who had not moved took one step forward. Zerath Vel of the Vrethkai Ascendancy saw the step. She looked at the guard. Her 4 eyes hardened. The guard did not look at her. He looked at the Velkorath. He was waiting for a signal. The Velkorath on one knee half turned. It looked at the guard. It made a small motion with its clawed hand. The signal was, not yet. Zerath Vel of the Vrethkai ascendancy, of the 6 inhabited systems, mother of 9, veteran of 9 wars, understood in that moment, with a clarity like ice water, that the 2 honor guards had been paid to stand there and let this happen. Not to help, to watch. And when the Velkorath was done, and everyone in the banquet chamber was dead, they would step forward, and they would announce that they had bravely tried to defend the delegates and had failed, and they would collect their money, and they would go home to whatever nest they came from, and the ceasefire would be dead, and the 3rd sector would be at war again by summer. She did not react to that understanding, not visibly. Vrethkai sovereign matriarchs did not react visibly to things. She turned her head very slowly toward the human. The human was getting up. He was leaning on the leg of the ceremonial table, and he was pushing himself up with his right arm, and his left arm was hanging by his side, but his fingers were moving, and he was watching the Velkorath rise from its one knee, and he was breathing through his nose the way an animal breathes when it does not want to make the sound of breath. She did not know what he was. She had read the manifest at 3 in the morning of the shift before. She had noted the name of the human military escort, Doran, Rachel, Colonel, and moved on. She had not read the name below it. She had certainly not noted what a cultural catering liaison 2nd grade did with his time. She did not know this man, but she was watching him now, and she was thinking in the small, cold part of her mind that had killed her older brother in a corridor no wider than a shoulder, that whatever this small, tired human was, he was not a catering liaison. The Velkorath was standing again. It was walking with a limp. Its dark rod was still in its right hand. Its left leg was leaking a thick, pale fluid onto the polished floor. Its 4 eyes had not moved from Owen. It was, for the first time since coming through the door, taking its time. Owen moved along the leg of the ceremonial table. He kept his back to the wood. He kept his knife hand between him and the Velkorath. He did not speak. He did not signal. His breath was even. He was watching the way the Velkorath moved, and he was thinking with the same part of his mind that had made him hone the knife 18 minutes that morning about the specific ways in which a joint is a joint. The Velkorath went for him again. This time it did not go fast. It went patient. It boxed him. It used its longer reach. It stayed at the edge of his knife. It jabbed with the rod once, twice, 3 times, driving him along the edge of the table. Owen took a hit across the forearm. He took another hit across the same forearm. His knife arm was slower now, his good arm. The Velkorath saw the slower arm. It went for the arm. The clawed hand came in low, meant to catch the wrist and break it. Owen turned his hand at the last quarter second and let the claw catch the knife handle instead. The claw closed. The claw pulled. The knife went with it. Now, Owen did not have a knife. The Velkorath, holding a carbon steel knife in a clawed hand made for something else, seemed pleased. Its inner jaw opened again. It stepped in. Owen picked up a chair. The chair was Vrethkai ceremonial, heart-glass legs, a padded seat, a back carved from a heavy, dark wood shipped in from a mining moon 3 sectors away. It weighed close to 11 kilograms. He had it up in one motion, right hand under the seat, left hand, his broken shoulder screaming, gripping the top of the back, and he swung it. The chair hit the Velkorath in the side of the head. The Velkorath's 4 eyes flickered. The chair came around the other way and hit it again. The eyes flickered again. The chair went up over Owen's head and came down on the Velkorath's collarbone plate, and the plate did not break, but the Velkorath's leg, the injured one, went out from under it, and it went down on both knees. Owen dropped the chair. He put both hands around the Velkorath's inner jaw from the sides, and he pushed the jaw open, and he put his knee into the soft place at the base of the throat, and he leaned. The Velkorath began to make a sound. The sound was not a scream. Velkorath did not scream. The sound was low and wet, and it came out of somewhere behind the jaw, and it climbed, and it stopped. Owen took the ceremonial carbon steel carving knife out of the Velkorath's clawed hand. He put it into the same soft place at the base of the throat where his knee had been. He drove it forward until the pommel of the knife hit the plate. The Velkorath fell over sideways. Owen sat down on the floor next to it. He put his good hand on the leg of the table. He was breathing very hard now. He was bleeding in 3 places. His left arm was, he was fairly sure, broken above the elbow. He looked up. Across the banquet hall, past the overturned tables, past the delegates who were beginning to raise their heads from behind whatever they had dived behind, he met the eyes of Zerath Vel of the Vrethkai Ascendancy. He looked at her for a moment. Then he turned his head and looked at the 2 Vrethkai honor guards at the northeast and northwest walls. He said, in the flat, rasping voice of a man whose lungs were not doing well, "Those 2, take them alive." Zerath Vel of the Vrethkai Ascendancy raised her ruined hand. She pointed at the northeast wall. She pointed at the northwest wall. She said, in a voice like a mine collapse, "Detain them." The remaining 8 honor guards in the room, none of them Vrethkai, understood the tone if not the language. They moved. Owen closed his eyes. He said, into the silence of the banquet chamber, "Hold still, I'm almost done." Nobody knew who he was talking to. The 6 hours that followed were the longest of Zerath Vel's very long life. The Yathara Station Medical Bay was designed for delegate injuries, cuts, sprains, the occasional envoy who'd been slipped a mild poison at a reception and needed a quick counteragent. It was not designed for what Owen Blake, second-grade cultural catering liaison, currently required. The medbay chief, a Seth surgeon with 6 spider-thin arms and a manner that Zerath had always found abrasive, had run out of arms. "He is refusing anesthesia," the surgeon said, for the 3rd time. Zerath Vel stood in the observation window. She had been standing there for 2 hours. Her broken hand was in a splint. She did not remember when the splint had been applied. Why is he refusing anesthesia? He says he does not like it. He says it makes him vomit. Tell him he will vomit less if he is unconscious. I did, he said, and I am translating exactly. I've been through worse dry. Zerath Vel considered that. Continue without it. The surgeon's 6 arms lifted in what on a Seth meant deeply personal offense. Sovereign matriarch, he has a broken humerus, he has a punctured shoulder, he has 3 cracked ribs and a laceration across the 4th intercostal that I need to close with sutures large enough to hold. I am not going to do that while he is awake. I am not that kind of physician. Owen Blake, on the table behind the observation window, lifted his head. His voice, through the observation feed, was thin. "You can pass me the needle." The surgeon turned in place. "I beg your pardon. You can pass me the needle. I can close the intercostal. It's mine anyway." The surgeon did not move. Owen said, "It's fine. Just give me the needle and the driver. Keep the antiseptic in reach. I'll do the small ones. You can do the humerus. That one I can't reach." There was a very long silence in the medbay. Zerath Vel of the Vrethkai Ascendancy, standing in the observation window, watched the surgeon slowly, 1 arm at a time, place a suture needle, a needle driver, a small pair of forceps, and a squeeze bottle of antiseptic on the tray beside Owen's right hand. The surgeon did this with the air of a physician who has been asked at gunpoint to hand a scalpel to a patient. The surgeon then stepped back 3 paces, turned all 6 of the surgeon's eyes to the observation window, and mouthed something in Seth that even a Vrethkai sovereign matriarch could recognize as a specific and creative form of profanity. Owen picked up the needle driver in his right hand. He looked down at his own side. He said, without looking up, "Don't be delicate." Fill the hole. He began to sew. Zerath Vel of the Vrethkai ascendancy of the 6 inhabited systems, mother of 9, veteran of 9 wars, killer of 6 of her own siblings in a corridor no wider than a shoulder, turned her head away from the observation window for the first time since she had entered the medbay, and she found she needed to put her uninjured hand flat against the wall for a moment before she trusted her legs again. She did not know what he was. She had assumed, watching him kill the Velkorath, that he was some kind of specialized combat asset, filed under a false grade for cover reasons, sent to the banquet under a catering apron because a sovereign matriarch's diplomatic delegation was too obvious a target for an operative of his caliber. That was normal practice. All the major species did it. She herself had once ridden 3 star systems as a scullery hand. But specialized combat assets did not sew themselves shut, not because they could not. They could. They did not because someone else always did it for them. Specialized combat assets had teams. Owen Blake did not have a team. She sent for his personnel file. The file arrived on a data slate carried by her adjutant, a young Vrethkai named Kethral, who had never seen a fight of any kind and who was, to his credit, not showing it. Zerath Vel took the slate. She sat down in the observation bay chair for the first time in 3 hours. She read. She read it once, then she read it again. Blake, Owen, human, male, 34 standard years old, native of Duluth, Minnesota, an urban settlement on the northern coast of an inland freshwater sea on the human homeworld. Occupation history, in order of appearance in the record: junior firefighter, Wildland Unit, 7 years, extraction crew, Kepler Extraction Colony, 14 years, cultural catering liaison, 2nd grade, 6 months. That was the whole file. There was no combat training entry. There was no unit designation. There was no medal, no citation, no reprimand, no note. There was a single flag at the bottom. In the automated header, a station-side physical had generated on arrival 2 days earlier. It read, in the flat, officious font of Conclave Medical, physical conditioning metrics abnormally elevated for a non-combat role. Proceed to secondary evaluation within 30 days. Nobody had scheduled the secondary evaluation. Zerath Vel touched the flag on the slate. The flag expanded. Cardiac output above normal for a human adult male. Skeletal density above normal. Grip strength 62 kilograms in the right hand, 59 in the left. Vertical leap, standing, unremarkable. Sustained aerobic load, unremarkable. Rate of injury recovery, based on prior station-side records, elevated. She looked up from the slate. Through the observation window, she could see Owen Blake tying off the last suture in his intercostal wound. He did it with his teeth. The Seth surgeon standing beside him had one of the surgeon's 6 arms lifted in what looked like a resigned salute. Zerath Vel stood up. She walked out of the observation bay. She walked down the corridor. She stopped at the maintenance panel Owen had used 6 hours earlier to call station security. She pressed the button. The Moran Star Weaver security officer answered on the 3rd pulse. Sovereign Matriarch, I want, Zerath Vel said, the entire personnel and criminal records archive for Kepler Extraction Colony, every barge log for the last 15 years, every incident report, every man who has cooked in the mess. I want it on my slate within the hour. And I want to know why my honor guard was allowed to purchase a drink with syndicate paper on this station this morning. And I want to know that within the hour also. The Moran Star Weaver security officer, who had spoken to Owen Blake earlier that day and had told him to return to his post, was silent for 2 seconds. Then that officer said, with a very carefully modulated voice that trembled only slightly around the edges, "Yes, Sovereign Matriarch." The panel clicked off. Zerath Vel of the Vrethkai ascendancy stood in the corridor for a moment with her forehead against the cool metal of the wall. She was, she noted with distant interest, breathing in a way she had not breathed since she was 17 years old. She went back to the med bay. She sat down again. She waited. Kepler Extraction Colony was not a colony. The word colony implied intent. Kepler was not intended. It had been drilled onto the crust of a heavy metallic world 12 years before the humans had even understood what heavy was, at a time when the outer sectors had needed more platinum than any lawful mining operation could deliver, and it had never quite been decommissioned. It stood at 1.4 standard gravities. That did not sound like much on a slate. It was, in practice, the difference between a man who walked upright and a man who walked upright for 14 years and then either stopped walking or became something that was not exactly a man anymore. Serath Vel of the Vrethkai Ascendancy read the barge logs for 2 hours. She read the incident reports for another hour. Then she asked her adjutant quietly for a strong drink. The adjutant brought it. She drank half of it and put it aside. At Kepler Extraction Colony, the barges arrived once a standard month. When a barge arrived, the extraction crews had 11 hours to unload it, sort it, process the raw material, and load out whatever the outbound cargo was, always dense, always at maximum permitted mass. 11 hours, at 1.4 gravities. The men and women who did this work were paid in flat scrip that was worth nothing off the mining moon and could only be spent on the moon, which meant the pay was, in real terms, food, tools, and the promise of a transfer back to lighter gravity when your contract was up. The average contract was 7 standard years. The average completion rate was 38%. Of the ones who completed, a third were medically flagged for accelerated skeletal wear. Of the ones who did not, most had died in incidents on the barges themselves, crushed by loads, lost to falls, caught in industrial machinery whose safeties had been removed to speed the 11-hour window. Owen Blake had gone to Kepler at 20. He had left it, alive, at 34. 14 years, 2 full contracts. The incident reports were the interesting part. Serath Vel read them again, in order, with her uninjured hand around the drink she was no longer drinking. Owen Blake, unloading Dock C, day 218 of Contract 1. A cargo strut fails during offload. 3,000 kilograms of platinum ore begins to fall. 2 crew members are underneath it. Owen Blake, who is not one of them, gets under the strut. He holds the strut against the frame long enough for the 2 crew to roll clear. He drops the strut. He is unconscious for 4 minutes. He returns to work the next shift. Owen Blake, Mess Hall, day 911 of Contract 1. A methane line ruptures behind the ovens. Fire enters the mess. Owen Blake, who is on shift, evacuates 14 people through a service passage he opens with a fire axe, then re-enters the mess and shuts the valve manually. He is treated for second-degree burns across both forearms. He returns to work the next shift. Owen Blake, Barge Dock A, day 164 of Contract 2. A crew member is caught by a mishandled ore drum against a bulkhead. Both legs are pinned. Owen Blake, who is off duty and eating in the mess, is called. He arrives with a hydraulic bar. He lifts the drum, which weighs 1,100 kilograms in local gravity, off the crew member's legs and holds it for the 98 seconds it takes the standby crew to arrive with a proper jack. The crew member survives with a full recovery. Owen Blake ruptures a disc in his lower back. He is treated. He returns to work the next shift. Serath Vel read the list of incident reports. There were 41 of them, spanning 14 years. Every single one of them ended with the phrase, "He returns to work the next shift." At the bottom of the file was a personal note, appended by a Kepler personnel officer whose name and species Serath did not recognize. The note said only, "We keep meaning to promote him. He keeps refusing. He says he is only here for his sister." Serath Vel of the Vrethkai Ascendancy closed the file. She sat in the observation bay for a long moment. Then she stood up and she walked into the med bay, and she pulled a chair up beside the treatment table where Owen Blake was propped against the headrest, his left arm splinted, his ribs wrapped in a stiff mesh, his eyebrow closed with 3 neat sutures. He was awake. He was drinking something warm out of a plastic cup. He was watching the door. He looked at her. She looked at him. She said through the translator, "You are not what the manifest says you are." He said, "No, the manifest is right. I'm a cook." "You are not only a cook." He thought about that. Then he said, "I've been a cook longer than I've been anything else. I'll go with cook. You held 1,100 kilograms off a man's legs for 1.5 of your standard minutes. That was a hydraulic bar. You held it. It was easier than letting go." She looked at him for a moment. She did not smile. Vrethkai did not smile, but the corners of all 4 of her eyes softened slightly, which meant for her species the same thing. She said, "Why did you go to Kepler?" He looked at her. His eyes were grey and tired. He said, "My sister is 19. She's at college on Earth, Duluth. She wants to be a marine biologist. I promised her a transfer payment before her spring semester started. Kepler pays." Sheriff Vel of the Vrethkai ascendancy nodded slowly. She said, "You have paid the transfer." "I've paid it every semester for the last 5 years." "How many more semesters?" 3. "Then you will be able to leave." "Then I'll be able to leave." She was silent for a moment. Then she said, "You do not appear afraid." He looked at his splint. He looked at his wrapped ribs. He looked at the cup of warm liquid in his good hand. He said, "Ma'am, I fought fire in dry country for 7 years, and I broke down cargo at 1.4 Gs for 14. I have been afraid every single day of my life. I got tired of it around year 3. Now I just do the work." Sherath Vel of the Vrethkai ascendancy, of the 6 inhabited systems of the outer arm of the Vrethkai ancestral wheel, mother of 9, veteran of 9 wars, thought for a very long moment about what he had said. She said, "We are not so different." He smiled a little. "Ma'am, with respect, I think we might be." She almost said something else. She did not. She stood up. She left the med bay. In the corridor outside, her adjutant, Keth Raul, was waiting for her with a fresh slate. His scales were pale. "Sovereign Matriarch, Station Security is reporting 3 inbound signatures on the outer sensor grid. They are not registered." Sherath Vel took the slate. She looked at the signatures. 3 narrow craft, each about the size of a courier shuttle, in a loose, triangular formation, coming in fast off a curved trajectory out of the gas giant's shadow. They were not squawking. They were not answering hails. They had turned on their approach thrusters only when they had already crossed the outer beacon line, which meant they had been drifting in on inertia since before the banquet had started. They had been waiting. How long until they dock? "They are not docking, Sovereign Matriarch. They are on an intercept vector for the ceremonial signing hall. Their approach angle suggests a forced entry through the observation gallery." "Time: 19 standard minutes." Serathvel handed him back the slate. She said, "The 2 detained honor guards. Have they spoken?" "Yes, the one at the northeast wall did. He named a mandant." "Who?" "Delegate Tarnvek of the Vrethkai Foreign Trade Council. Sovereign Matriarch, he named your own delegate. Tarnvek has served the ascendancy for 83 years. He was in the observation gallery this morning." Sherathvel of the Vrethkai ascendancy stood in the corridor and thought about this. Tarnvek, Foreign Trade Council. She could see his face, a face she had known since he was a young clerk with an ink stain on his left claw. He had authored the Outer Sector Trade Concordance that had, in her judgment, stabilized the sector for the last 40 years. He was a wealthy man now. He was also, she recalled with a sudden strange clarity, personally invested in the Outer Sector arms industry. If the ceasefire went through, the arms concordance she had personally drafted would gut his portfolio inside a year. She had signed the draft 2 months earlier. She had brought it here for ratification. She had not shown it to Tarnvek because Vrethkai sovereign matriarchs did not show drafts of arms concordances to Foreign Trade Council members before ratification. He had found out anyway. Zerath Vel took a slow, controlled breath. She said, "Where is Tarnvek now?" Kethral hesitated. He requested a private audience with the Seth Confederacy delegation 40 minutes ago in the observation gallery. They granted it. The gallery is on the same vector as the incoming ships. She looked at him. He looked back. She said, quietly, "He is preparing to receive them." "Yes, sovereign matriarch." She thought for one more moment. Then she said, "Rouse the mess cook." Kethral opened his mouth. He closed it. He opened it again. "Sovereign matriarch. He has a broken humerus and a punctured intercostal. He is not in a condition to rouse him. Tell him to bring the knife." Kethral bowed. He turned and ran. Zerath Vel of the Vrethkai ascendancy stood in the corridor for one long breath. She looked down at her own splinted hand. She flexed the fingers as far as the splint allowed. She thought about the corridor at 17 and the glass blade and her older brother turning toward her holding his own severed arm. She thought about her 9 children. She thought about the ceasefire. She thought about the third sector. She thought about the small, tired human with the grey eyes who had said, "I got tired of being afraid around year 3. Now I just do the work." She began to walk toward the observation gallery. 2 minutes later, Owen Blake caught up to her in the corridor. He was walking slower than he had that morning. His left arm was in a sling. There was fresh blood soaking through the wrap on his ribs. He had opened something moving too fast to get his shirt back on. He had put the shirt back on anyway. He had his catering apron on over it because that was what he had, because nobody had thought to give him a coat. He was holding the ceremonial carbon steel carving knife in his right hand. He said, "Ma'am." She said, "Cook." They walked together toward the observation gallery. He said, 3 ships. 3 ships. 19 minutes. 1 Velkorath per ship. That is our estimate." He thought about that as they walked. She glanced at him. His face was calm in the way of a man doing arithmetic in the middle of a workday. He said, "Ma'am, can I ask something?" "You may." "The 2 guards in custody. The ones on syndicate paper." "Yes." "They named who paid them." "They named a member of my delegation." "How senior?" "Very." "Is he in the observation gallery right now, meeting with the people who own the 3 ships?" She looked at him. He looked at her. She said after a moment, "Yes, cook." He nodded. He kept walking. He said, "I would like to bring a chair to the gallery, ma'am." She looked at him again. "A chair," she said, "for sitting on, between exchanges." She said without any inflection at all, "You will find one in the corridor outside the gallery, cook." "Thank you, ma'am." They walked. They did not speak again until they reached the gallery doors. Just before they went through, he stopped. He looked at the ceiling for a moment. The ceiling of Yathara Station was polished dark alloy, faintly reflective. He could see in it the blurred shape of himself and the sovereign matriarch beside him. He said, quietly, without looking at her, "There's a girl on Earth, Duluth. Her name is Claire. She's 19, she's studying marine biology. Her spring semester transfer is due in 11 days. It's in an account. I've already sent it. She doesn't know I'm here. She thinks I'm on a rotation." Zerath Vel of the Vrethkai ascendancy said nothing. He said, "If I don't make it back off this station, I would appreciate if somebody made sure she gets a note. Nothing dramatic. Just that the rotation ran long. That's all. She's got a spring semester to finish." She said, in a voice that had no clicks in it, "Cook, I will carry that note to her home myself." He nodded once. He pushed the door of the observation gallery open with his good hand. They went in. The observation gallery of Yethera Station was long and narrow and made almost entirely of glass. 200 meters of transparent aluminum wall on one side, giving out onto the vast black curve of the gas giant below. Along the other wall, low benches. In the middle of the gallery, a small round table for private negotiations with 3 chairs. Tarn Vek of the Vrethkai Foreign Trade Council sat in one of the chairs. The other 2 chairs were empty. Tarn Vek was old. Not as old as Zerath Vel. Nobody in the Ascendancy was as old as Zerath Vel, but old enough that his scales had gone pale copper and his 4 eyes had the slight cloudiness that came with age. He was thin. His robes were the deep green of the Trade Council. His hands rested folded on the table. He looked up as they came in. His eyes registered Zerath Vel. His eyes registered Owen Blake, sagging slightly, catering apron over a bloody shirt, ceremonial carving knife in his good hand. His 4 eyes flickered. He said, in the language of the Ascendancy, without waiting for the translator, "Sovereign Matriarch, what is a human doing in the observation gallery?" Zerath Vel walked to the table. She placed her uninjured hand on the back of one of the empty chairs. She did not sit. She said, in the standard language of the conclave, so that the human beside her would understand, "He is the ranking military escort of the human delegation Tarn Vek. His designation on the manifest is Cultural Catering Liaison. That was a filing error. He has been reassigned in the field." Tarn Vek's 4 eyes flickered again. He shifted to the standard language. "I see. And the ceremonial carving knife. That is his weapon." "His weapon." "Yes." Tarn Vek was silent for a moment. Then he said, "Sovereign Matriarch, I requested this gallery for a private negotiation with the Seth Confederacy. They are due in 6 minutes. May I ask what business you have here?" Zerath Vel said, "You may. I have come to have a conversation with you before your Seth guests arrive about your recent transactions." "My transactions are the Ascendancy's business only, insofar as they concern the Ascendancy." "Yes." He looked at her. She looked at him. He said quietly in the language of the Ascendancy again, so that it would not be translated to the human, "Zerath, old friend, whatever you think you have found, you will not gain by pursuing it here." She said in conclave standard, so that the human beside her would hear every word, "Tarn Vek, 2 of my honor guards are currently in custody. They have named you as their mandant. 3 unregistered courier ships are inbound to this station. Their approach vector points at this gallery. I'm here to ask, before they arrive, whether you would like to walk with me to a cell of your own accord, or whether you would prefer that I have my adjutant drag you there." Tarn Vek looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "No." She waited. He said, "You would put me in a cell for the crime of loving the Ascendancy more than you do. I would put you in a cell for the crime of trying to have me killed at a peace summit. You are dismantling the arms industry that has kept our young men employed for 2 generations. I am dismantling the arms industry that has been selling munitions to the enemies of our own outer worlds for 2 generations, Tarn Vek, and you know that. And you have known it for longer than I have." He said, "The Concordance will end 40,000 jobs on the Ascendancy shipyards. The war it prevents will end 400,000 lives. You do not know that. I know exactly that." They looked at each other across the table. Tarn Vek said softly, "Zerath, I have loved you for 83 years, as a mentor, as a colleague, as a queen. Do not make me do this." She said, "I have loved you for 83 years also, Tarn Vek. It is why I came in person to ask, instead of sending a squad." He closed his 4 eyes. He opened them. He said, "The Seth delegation will be here in 4 minutes. The ships will breach the gallery wall 2 minutes later. The Velkarath aboard those ships are not the Keth caste you saw this morning. They are a different lineage. They are called Reth Velkarath. They are harder to kill. They have been paid for you and for me both. My arrangement did not extend past today. Zerathvel's 4 eyes hardened. Your arrangement did not include your own survival. He almost smiled. No, Zerath, it did. They lied to me. That at least is my consolation. She looked at him. He looked back. He said, You will have to leave the gallery now, both of you. I will remain. There is a very small chance that if I am here, in the chair alone, they will consider their contract for me fulfilled and leave. It buys you 4 minutes to evacuate the Seth delegation and warn the Miran. She stared at him. He stared back. She said, Tarnvek, old friend, if you sit in that chair, you die. Yes, alone. Yes. She waited. He said quietly, It is the only thing I have left to give the ascendancy. Take it. She stood at the back of the empty chair for one long moment. She let go of the chair. She turned. She said, without looking back, Cook, we are leaving. Owen Blake looked at Tarnvek, then at Zerathvel, then back at Tarnvek. He said, in the flat, rasping voice of a man whose lungs were not doing well, Sir, 3 of them. You want to sit there alone, with 3 Reth Velkorath coming through that window. Tarnvek said in the standard language, Yes, human. Owen said, That's not going to work. Tarnvek's 4 eyes flickered. Owen said, They don't leave witnesses. That's the whole point of hiring them. You sit here, they come through the window, they kill you, and then they go looking for anyone in this station who might have seen them. That's how the Keth caste operates. That's how any Velkorath lineage operates. Your delegation, the Keth delegation, the Miran station security, and my sovereign matriarch here, they are all dead the moment you die alone in this chair. Tarnvek was silent. Owen said, I'd like to propose something else. Tarnvek looked at him. Owen said, You sit in the chair. My sovereign matriarch goes and warns everyone else. I stay in the room. When the ships come through, I do what I can. That gives everyone their 4 minutes and probably a little more. Zerathvel of the Vrethkai ascendancy turned around. She said, Cook. He looked at her. He said, Ma'am, I have a broken arm and 3 cracked ribs, and I've been sewn up in 2 places. I am not walking out of here at speed. I would slow you down. I am more use here. She said, Cook, 3 Reth Velkorath. He said, Ma'am, 1 at a time is 1 at a time. That's all it ever is. Please warn the station. She looked at him for a very long moment. Then she said, Your name is Owen. Yes, ma'am. Owen Blake, of Duluth. Yes, ma'am. She said softly in the conclave standard, The girl gets the note. Thank you, ma'am. She turned. She walked toward the door. Halfway there, she stopped. She turned back. She said, Owen Blake, when this is done, I will be at this door. Whether you are on your feet or not, I will be at this door. Do you understand me? He said, Yes, ma'am. She said, I will not be at this door alone. She left. The observation gallery was very quiet. Tarnvek looked at the humans standing beside the chair. He said, May I ask why? Owen said, Why what, sir? Why you? Owen thought about that for a moment. He looked at the vast curve of the gas giant beyond the window. He thought about a cold city on a freshwater sea. He thought about a 19-year-old girl with dark hair studying marine biology, and about a spring semester transfer he had already sent, and about all the mornings on Kepler when he had gotten up in gravity that was not meant for a human body and had done the work anyway because somebody had to. He said, Sir, my sister is on Earth. She's got a semester to finish. If those things get through this station, they don't stop at this station. They go home to whoever paid them, and whoever paid them starts a war, and a war eventually reaches Earth, and it reaches Duluth, and it reaches a 19-year-old girl who's supposed to be studying marine biology. So it's me. That's why. Tarnvek was silent for a long moment. Then he said, I do not think, human, that I have understood your species until this moment. Owen said, That's all right, sir. Most of us don't understand each other either. He walked slowly to the wall opposite the transparent aluminum window. He set the ceremonial carving knife down on the low bench. He picked up, from a corner, where a maintenance crew had left it, a fire axe. Yathara Station kept fire axes in every corridor. They were carbon steel, heavy at the head, wooden hafts wrapped in leather. They were, by regulation, honed once a week by station maintenance. Owen tested the edge with his thumb. It was not sharp enough. He picked up the whetstone he had brought from the kitchen in his apron pocket. He sat down on the low bench next to the ceremonial carving knife. He began, very slowly, to hone the fire axe. Tarnvek watched him for one long moment. Then he said, quietly, "Human, sir. When the ships come, I will fire the disruptor concealed in my chair as long as I am able. It is a small model. It will not stop them, but it may buy you 2 seconds." Owen looked up from the axe. He said, "Sir, thank you." He went back to honing. The window came in at 47 seconds past the hour. There was no warning. There was no ship visible against the curve of the gas giant. There was a section of transparent aluminum, 3 meters wide by 5 tall, and then that section of transparent aluminum ceased to exist. It did not shatter. It vanished, replaced in the same instant by a cold, roaring wall of air that was fleeing the observation gallery for space, and by 3 tall shapes that were coming the other way. The gallery's atmospheric containment fields snapped on a quarter of a second later. The air stopped fleeing. The cold roaring stopped. The Reth Velkorath were inside. They were bigger than the one at the banquet. The one at the banquet had been 3 meters tall. These were closer to 3.5. Their plating was not the oily dark of the Keth caste. It was matte black, with a pale bone ridge running from the crown of the skull down the back. Their inner jaws were larger. Their eyes were arranged in a downward-pointing triangle instead of a square. They moved differently, lower, faster, less like gliders, and more like something that had learned to run. They came in low. Tarnvek fired his concealed disruptor from the chair. He was a poor shot. He was old. He had not carried a weapon in 40 years. He hit one of them in the leg plate, and the leg plate blackened but did not break, and the Reth Velkorath in front of him did not slow down, and it was on him in 1.5 strides. He looked, in the last quarter second of his life, past the black shape at the far end of the gallery, at the human standing beside the low bench, with the ceremonial carving knife in one hand and the honed fire axe in the other. He said, in the language of the Ascendancy, so that the translator would not carry it, "I am sorry, Serath." The Reth Velkorath's inner jaw came down. Tarnvek was gone. Owen was already moving. He did not go toward the one at the chair. He went toward the 2, coming down the length of the gallery. He kept the low bench between him and them for as long as he could. He kept his weight forward. His broken left arm was in a sling, and he did not use it. His right hand had the fire axe. The carving knife was in his belt. The first Reth Velkorath saw him and adjusted its angle to close. He let it come. At the last meter, he did what he had done to the first one. He dropped low, went under the arm, and drove into the joint seam at the neck. This time, he did not have the ceremonial knife in his hand. He had the fire axe. The axe head was heavier and duller than the knife had been, but it was still carbon steel, and he still knew, with the automatic knowledge of 14 years of taking apart whatever the barges shipped, exactly where the plate did not meet the plate. The axe blade went in through the joint seam and out the other side. The Reth Velkorath's head came off in a single motion. The body kept walking for 2 more steps and then folded sideways. Owen was already turning. The second Reth Velkorath was on him. It caught him in the chest with its dark rod. 2 of the 3 cracked ribs from the morning went. Something inside his right lung tore. He hit the far wall of the observation gallery hard enough to leave a smear. He did not go down. He came off the wall with the fire axe in a low grip, and he swung it into the side of the Reth Velkorath's knee joint. The knee buckled. The creature went down on one knee. Its inner jaw opened, and it lunged for his face. He caught the jaw on the axe haft. The wooden haft cracked. He drove his forehead into the ridge of bone above the creature's eyes. The creature's eyes flickered. He drove his forehead into the same ridge again. The creature's eyes flickered again. He drove the axe head, held now in a broken haft, down through the joint under the jaw plate. The creature stopped moving. He staggered back. There was blood in his mouth. He spat it. It was black under the amber lights. The third, Reth Velkorath, the one that had killed Tarn Vek, was walking down the length of the gallery toward him. It was walking slow. It was, he understood, looking at him with something he had not seen on the first two, not calculation, not hunger, something like curiosity. He looked at it. He said quietly in English, because the translator on his lapel had been cracked when he hit the wall and was no longer transmitting, "You want to know what I am?" He picked up the carving knife from his belt with his right hand. His left hand was still in a sling, but the fingers were moving. He said, "You want to know how a man from Duluth kills two of you in less than a minute?" He took a step forward. He said, "I'll show you." He thought about his sister then, not because he wanted to, because it happened. Because when the body gets tired past a certain point, the mind reaches for what it has, and what Owen Blake had, at the far edge of what a human body could still do, was a memory of a girl standing at the end of a wooden pier in November wind. 10 years old, small, furious that he was leaving for Kepler and could not tell her why. Her red mittens balled into fists, her mouth open in the specific shape of a child who does not know how to shout at somebody she loves. He had said, that day, "You've got to make it easy on Mom while I'm gone. Can you do that?" She had said, "I'll do it if you promise to come back." He had said, "I promise." He was, he realized, still keeping the promise. He took another step. The third Reth Velkorath came at him. It came fast, faster than the first two, and it did not go for the neck seam. It had watched the first two die at the neck seam. It went instead for his good arm, the arm holding the knife, with its dark rod driving in a straight lance thrust. Owen was already turning. He let the rod pass along the inside of his forearm. He let it cut him. He let it cut him deep. He did not care about the arm. He cared about being inside the reach of the arm, and by giving up 8 centimeters of skin, he was inside now. He came up under the Reth Velkorath's guard with the ceremonial carbon steel carving knife pointed not at the neck, but at the eye. The knife went into the lower left eye. The Reth Velkorath's other 3 eyes went wide. It jerked back, dragging Owen with it, his hand still on the handle, the blade still in the eye socket. The two of them locked together in a dance neither of them had planned. It slammed him against the transparent aluminum wall. The wall did not break. It slammed him again. Something in his back went. He kept his hand on the knife. He twisted it. The blade cracked. The tip broke off inside the socket. The Reth Velkorath's inner jaw came down on his shoulder. He felt teeth close. He felt teeth stop. He looked past the creature's jaw at his own left arm, the arm in the sling, the arm he was not supposed to be using. His left hand had come up. His left hand had wrapped, somehow, around the base of the creature's inner jaw. His left hand, which 2 hours earlier had been rated at 59 kilograms of grip strength, was holding the inner jaw of a Reth Velkorath open by 1.5 centimeters. That 1.5 centimeters was the difference between his shoulder in the jaw and his shoulder in the jaw all the way. His grip was slipping. The teeth were beginning to close again. He said into the creature's face quietly, in English, "Hold still, I'm almost done." His right hand, the hand that had held the broken knife, let go of the broken knife. It closed on the pommel of the ceremonial disruptor Tarn Vek had been holding when he died. Tarn Vek's disruptor. The one he had said would not stop them, but might buy 2 seconds. The pommel was warm. The trigger was small. He put the barrel against the base of the creature's inner jaw from the underside, angled up toward what he was fairly sure was the brain, and he pulled the trigger. The disruptor bolt went in through the roof of the mouth and out through the top of the skull. The Reth Velkorath's 4 eyes went out one after the other. It fell. Owen fell with it. He hit the floor of the observation gallery on his back with a Reth Velkorath body across his chest. The body was heavy. He could not move it. He did not try. He lay on the floor of the observation gallery of Yethera Station, 3,000 light-years from anything green, and he stared up at the dark polished ceiling. He thought for a moment that he could see the reflection of Duluth in the ceiling, a cold city on the edge of a freshwater sea. He thought about how the pier looked in November. He thought about a 19-year-old girl with dark hair sitting at a small kitchen table in a rented apartment near the university, doing her marine biology homework with a mug of tea beside her elbow. He thought, "Claire, I'm sorry I took so long." He closed his eyes. He heard the door of the observation gallery open. He did not open his eyes. He knew who it was. He heard footsteps. He heard the low click and shift of Vrethkai body armor. He heard, very close to him, the sound of a sovereign matriarch of the Vrethkai ascendancy sinking to her knees on the floor of the observation gallery beside him. She said, in a voice that had almost no clicks in it at all, "Cook." He opened his eyes. She was there. Her 4 eyes were on him. There were 3 armored honor guards behind her. Different guards, not the ones from the banquet, not any of the traitors. There was a Seth medical team behind them. There was, over her shoulder, the shape of Kethral, her adjutant, moving fast toward him with a stabilizer kit. She said, "You are alive." He said, "Ma'am, yes, ma'am." She said, You are very much alive, Cook." He said, "Ma'am, I would like to sit up, if you don't mind. This one is heavy." She lifted the Reth Velkorath body off his chest with her uninjured arm. It was easier for her than for him. She was a sovereign matriarch. He was a man with a broken humerus. She lifted the body aside and she looked down at him. He looked up at her. He said, "Tarn Vek." She said, "I saw." He tried. "I saw." They looked at each other for a moment. She said, "The Seth delegation is safe. The Miran are safe. The 2 detained honor guards have named the Reth Velkorath's dispatchers. Their ships are already crossing the outer beacon and are being tracked. The ceasefire will be ratified this evening." He said, "Good." She said, "The signing hall has been moved. It is now the banquet hall, the one you cleared this morning." He said, "Good." She said, "Do you know why?" "Ma'am, because I asked for it." He looked at her. She said, "The delegates were nervous. I told them a room that had already had 1 assassin killed in it was the safest room on the station. They agreed. They will sign there in 2 hours. He nodded once. She said, "You will not be there." "No, ma'am." "You will be on this station, in that medical bay, with the Seth surgeon, and you will not attempt to sew yourself shut again." "No, ma'am," she said softly. "Owen Blake of Duluth." "Ma'am, there is one thing I would like to ask you, before I let the surgeon take you." "Ma'am," she said, "in exchange for what you have done today, the Vrethkai Ascendancy will grant you any reasonable request within its power. Any office, any commission, any title, any transport home, any sum of standard scrip that would allow your sister to complete her marine biology studies in comfort for the rest of her life, and to fund any research she might wish to undertake, and to purchase whatever house on whatever coast of Earth she might choose. Any of these, or all of these, whatever you ask, I will bring it to the full Ascendancy Council this evening, and I will not sit until it is granted." She waited. He looked at her for a long time. He said, "Ma'am." "Yes, Cook." He said, "The one thing?" "The one thing." He said, "Is there a real coffee machine on this station anywhere?" She stared at him. He said, "The kitchen only has the synthetic kind. I've been drinking it for 6 months. Ma'am, I love my job. I love cooking. I don't want the office. I don't want the title. I don't need the money. Claire's semester is paid and my contract ends in 3 years and I've saved enough for the rest. But I would really, really like a cup of real coffee. Ma'am, that's the ask. That's the whole ask. Zerath Vel, of the Vrethkai ascendancy of the 6 inhabited systems of the outer arm of the Vrethkai ancestral wheel, mother of 9, veteran of 9 wars, killer of 6 of her own siblings in a corridor no wider than a shoulder, sat on the floor of the observation gallery of Yathara Station for a long moment, with her 4 eyes on the small, tired human in the catering apron. Then she began very quietly to laugh. It was not a Vrethkai sound. It was not any sound the translator on his cracked lapel would have understood. It was a laugh. It came from somewhere deep in her, and it came out of her like a chain of subsonic clicks going up into a bell tone. And the honor guards behind her stiffened because they had never heard it before, and the Seth medical team stopped where they stood, and Kethral, her adjutant, went completely still with the stabilizer kit half open in his hands. She laughed for perhaps 10 seconds, then she stopped. She wiped her eyes. Vrethkai did that at her age with the back of her uninjured hand. She said, "There is a small private cafeteria on the diplomatic level of this station, Cook, in which the coffee is prepared from beans, grown by a family of farmers in a region of Earth called Columbia. The beans are shipped here at appalling expense by a courier service that has been contracted by my delegation for the last 12 years. The coffee is drunk exclusively by senior Vrethkai foreign trade officers. It is, I am told, quite good." He said, "I would like to try that coffee, ma'am." She said, "You will drink from that cafeteria for the rest of your natural life, on my authority, in any quantity, at any hour, as soon as the Seth surgeon has closed your intercostal properly and reset your humerus." She reached out with her uninjured hand, and she put it very gently on his chest, above the wrapped ribs, in the place where a Vrethkai would place a hand on the chest of her own child if that child had done something the Vrethkai considered brave. The Seth medical team watching understood the gesture instantly. They stepped back 1 pace. Kethral turned his face away because Vrethkai adjutants did not watch sovereign matriarchs at those moments. She said, "Owen." "Ma'am." "Thank you." He closed his eyes. He said, "Ma'am, any time." The post-mortem, the one they filed in the official record, took 6 hours to compile. The version that would appear in the Conclave archive contained the full personnel record of Owen Blake of Duluth, updated with a marginal note in the sovereign matriarch's own hand: "Reclassify, combat capable, do not deploy. He is where he is meant to be." The classified version, the one Zerath Vel wrote for herself and kept, contained a single line. It said only, "He was tired every day of his life, and he did the work." The 3 unregistered ships that had come in behind the gas giant were captured, boarded, and their crews handed over to the Miran Star Weavers for interrogation. The Reth Velkorath dispatcher, a Keth syndicate coordinator, named on Owen Blake's cracked lapel translator only as the client, was identified within the week. The client had never left the outer sectors. The client believed itself to be untouchable. The Vrethkai ascendancy, over the course of the following month, corrected that belief. The ceasefire held. Owen Blake spent 9 days in the Seth surgeon's care. He drank the coffee from the small private cafeteria for 4 of those days, twice a day, in a heavy ceramic cup that Zerath Vel had brought up from the diplomatic level herself. He complained on day 5 that it was actually a little too good, and asked whether they had anything closer to the diner blend he was used to. Zerath Vel had a case of that blend, flown in from a coffee shop on Duluth Superior Street, inside 48 standard hours. Owen said it tasted like home. He drank it every morning for the rest of his stay. On day 10, he asked when he could go back to the kitchen. The Seth surgeon said in a resigned voice that he could stand at a warming shelf and supervise if he did not use the left arm at all, and if he sat down for 15 minutes out of every hour, and if he agreed not to hone any knives for 6 weeks. Owen said he could live with that. He went back to the kitchen. He served the roast at the delegation lunch that afternoon. He cut the slices himself, one-handed, with a small, dull kitchen knife. The delegates who watched him do this did not talk. They did not talk for a long time after that meal. In fact, they took their food and they walked out of the mess in silence, and each one of them, on the way out, stopped at the corner table where he was sitting and said something small in whatever language they spoke, in the private register of their own people. None of them, Zerathvel noticed later, said thank you. They said something older than that. 6 months later, when his rotation ended and the transport back to Earth finally opened, Owen Blake stood in the docking hall of Yathara Station with a single duffel bag over his good shoulder and a folded catering apron in his hand. The apron was the one he had worn the day of the banquet, the one with the black stains under the amber lights. He had wanted, before he left, to give it to the station cleaning staff. Zerathvel of the Vrethkai Ascendancy, who had come to the docking hall in person to see him off, gently took the apron from him and said that it belonged in the Yathara Station archive and that she would see to its placement herself. She then walked with him to the transport door. She stopped there. She said, "Owen Blake of Duluth. Ma'am," she said, "your sister received the note. In her third-year textbook, as a bookmark, as requested. It read only, 'The rotation ran a little long.' It also read, 'Your brother is coming home in the spring.'" He looked at her. He said, "Ma'am, thank you." She said, "The transfer for her spring semester has been made, in advance, for the next 12 semesters, from the Ascendancy's own foreign account, my own signature. It is not a gift, it is a payment for services rendered." He was silent for a moment. He said, "Ma'am, that's more than a payment, that's a whole life." She said, "Then live it, cook. Live it with her. Take her to that pier on the freshwater sea and stand in the November wind and drink coffee that tastes like home. That is the honor of the Ascendancy discharged." He said quietly, "Ma'am, I owe you one." She said, "No, Owen, you do not." They stood at the door. He shifted the duffel bag on his good shoulder. He looked once back at the corridor of Yathara Station, at the polished dark ceiling that could reflect a man who had crossed 6 meters of banquet floor in 3 strides. Then he looked at her. He said, "Ma'am, just to be clear." "Yes, cook. Thank you for the coffee, really, but just so we're straight going forward, I don't do windows." Zerathvel of the Vrethkai Ascendancy of the 6 inhabited systems, mother of 9, veteran of 9 wars, killer of 6 of her own siblings in a corridor no wider than a shoulder, laughed for the 2nd time in her life. The transport door closed, the station carried on, the ceasefire held. What a story! The real weapon in this galaxy was never the disruptor, never the plasma lance, never the cast bred and unmade for a single purpose. The real weapon was a tired man from a cold city who had decided, somewhere before the fight began, that stopping was not available to him. If you love this story, drop a like. It is what keeps these tales alive out here in the black. Share it with someone who also loves science fiction, about the human who walks into the impossible and keeps walking. Somebody in your life needs this one today. Subscribe and turn on the bell so you do not miss the next epic. There is always another room going silent when a human walks in. And leave a comment. This one has a question. If you were the sovereign matriarch of the Vrethkai Ascendancy and Owen Blake stood in your docking hall on his last day, would you have offered him the coffee cafeteria for life, or would you have offered him a seat on the Ascendancy High Council itself? Keep your eyes on the void out there. Every once in a while, a human walks into it.